Okay, so I finally got an opportunity to check out all of the new Sony audio products in my house, in my dad's house, from the Sony event I went to back in the spring. I'm going to compare the new products, the Bar 9, the Bar 8, and the Quads, to the older units that we used to have, the HTA 7000, 5000, and HTA 9. And then I'm going to give you guys some buying advice at the end, kind of where I would spend my money if I needed to buy some of these Sony products. So let's get into this video. I hope you enjoy. So in early 2024, got to see the Bar 9, the Bar 8, and the Quads up at a Sony event, as well as some of the other TVs. Very cool event where we were able to check out the technology before it came out. But of course, over the year, it takes time to check them out, review them, find a home for all the products, including sending some of these products to my dad back in Wisconsin. So let's get right into it first. As we were talking, we have the Sony Bar 8, which is an 11 speaker Dolby Atmos surround sound soundbar that is really fantastic. Very cool looking unit. We have the Sony Bar 9, which is a 13 speaker soundbar. So even better. It adds in 2 beam tweeters and some passive radiators over the Bar 8. And then you also have the Bravia Theater Quads, which is really a fantastic sound system. Again, that's upgraded from the HTA 9 that we'll talk about the differences between those. But I really like the Quads as well. So 3 new products right there. Then again, we had the HTA 7000, the HTA 5000, and then the HTA 9 system from a couple years ago. And then fortunately, the subwoofers and the rears carry over from before. So you have the SWSA 3 and 5 subwoofers, and then you have the 3 and 5 rear speakers. And again, I'll go over that in detail in just a second. So I'm going to start with the Bravia Bar 9 because that's the soundbar that I have and I'm using in my room with the Sony A95L QD OLED. Fantastic pairing, and that's where I had the HTA 7000 previously. So it's very easy to compare these two. First, the Bar 9 is actually about the same length as the HTA 7000, but it is shorter, and then it's a slimmer soundbar. It's definitely lighter too. So where the HTA 7000 was this massive, gigantic, heavy soundbar, the Bar 9 is actually a little bit slimmer and smaller and more compact, but it actually has better sound quality, and that's something that Sony wanted to highlight when they showed us all the new components of the Bar 9 out on a table, kind of how they all work and the quality of these pieces. And I must admit, it does sound a little bit better. It is a very solid soundbar in general. I think having those beam tweeters does widen out the soundstage a bit, and then having the passive radiators does add some bass to an HTA 7000 that already sounded pretty heavy with regards to the bass for a soundbar standalone unit. I did take that A7000 to a friend's house where he uses it with his outdoor projector, and I was pretty surprised at how good the HTA 7000 sounds outdoors and gives great surround sound in that huge outdoor setting. But the Bar 9 is definitely upgraded, and also it does work with the Bravia Connect app, which is very cool. Now you have everything on your phone with regards to volume settings. You can raise and lower the sound stage. You can connect your rear speakers and subs a little bit easier than before. And most importantly, you're able to optimize the sound in your room based on the microphone on your phone and interacting with the speakers, whether it just be the Bar 9 or surround sound and all that. So Bravia Connect app, very cool. Another great feature is that it works with my A95L QD OLED very well with regards to pulling up the menus and even the new Voice Zoom 3, which is a great way for you to increase dialogue when you really can't hear something, if it's in a very quiet setting or if there's background noise. I like that the Voice Zoom 3 has the ability to kind of go from 0 up to 5 and increase or decrease based on your room conditions and not just either on or off. So that's something that is great about the Bar 9 and working with the newer TVs, whether it be a 2024 TV in general or the A95L QD OLED, which is a carryover, but it still works with it. And overall, the Bar 9 sounds really good compared to the HTA 7000. I do feel like it's a little bit clearer, it's a little bit louder, and in general, awesome. I still think it's great to add in one of the subwoofers. In my bedroom, I actually have the SWSA 3. I do think the SWSA 5 is even better, but for a smaller room, I don't think it's necessary. The 3 does a very good job for the price point, so I like that, and we'll talk more about that in buying advice. Now, to talk about the Bar 8, I actually have to take you with me to Wisconsin, where I dropped off a fabulous 65-inch Bravia 8 along with the Bar 8 for my parents to use in their house. And they were coming from basically just a 2-channel Yamaha receiver with some old speakers. I'm not even sure what kind of speakers they were, but adding the Bravia 8 TV, where we had a 60-inch Samsung, I think it was, an LED from back in 2013, was quite the upgrade for my father. He's been wanting a TV for a while, so I'm happy happy that I was able to send all these products over to him for Christmas and, give him a little upgrade. And the Bar 8 is also fantastic because I have to admit, it is much better than the HTA 5000. One of the things about the HTA 5000 that I wasn't thrilled with is that there was a big drop off from the 7000 down to the 5000 with regards to how loud it can get. Even if you crank that sucker up, it just didn't have the same room filling ability that the HTA 7000 had or the HTA 9. So the Bar 8 has all the same components as the Bar 9. It just doesn't have the beam tweeters or the passive radiators, but it still has all of the same, main components of the Bar 9, but just not quite as premium. But the Bar 8 worked really good for this room that I installed it in. The combination of Bravia 8 with the center sync, which I actually like on OLED TVs, don't necessarily like it on LED TVs, but with the OLED TV and the Bar 8, I thought it sounded fantastic, so much more immersive. We had the 360 spatial mapping, which is awesome from Sony if you haven't checked it out. The room fills with sound from every direction, so when you're watching a movie, absolutely awesome. Now, at their house, we did pair it with the smaller rear speakers, the RS3S rears, which do not have the upfiring speaker, but still add a ton of great sound. And I think that was a perfect pairing along with the SW3 sub. So as I will tell you in the buying advice section, this is a pretty good pairing, and I think it's going to work for a lot of people. But overall, very happy with the Bar 8, very happy with the Bravia 8 as well. It's a very good TV. And with the accessories, this sound system in my parents' upstairs living room is ridiculous and probably way too much than they need, but I think that would do for most people. And I think that's kind of just where most people would settle when it comes to buying some of these Sony sound systems. And then for their downstairs, we put the HTA 9 because we have the new theater quad in my living room, which is absolutely fantastic. I think Sony fixed basically everything that I disliked about the HTA 9 while improving the overall sound quality and Wi-Fi signals. So yes, the Sony Bravia theater quad speaker system is really cool. The speakers just look a lot nicer than the old HTA 9 speakers, even though I didn't mind them at the time, but it's just a nice flat profile. You can set them on stands, which are a little complicated to put together, I have to admit, or you can wall mount them, which does take a little bit more work. And the speaker wall mounts, they're a little bit cumbersome and not my favorite, but you have to find a way to mount things on the wall. And the cool thing about these speakers for on the wall is you could get a power outlet behind the speakers, which is something that you would need in order to have it, kind of be up to code in America at least. And instead of doing that, I kind of was just lazy and let the cords hang down for now. But that's a different story. Overall, though, the sound is really nice. I like the color of the speakers. It's a little bit easier on a white wall. I do think that if you have that off-white cream color of the HDA 9, it does look a little weird if you have kind of a cool wall color, a blue or a gray. So I think having a gray just is a little bit more neutral, a little bit easier on the eyes in general. And the fact that they're flat just looks nicer too. As far as the performance, I have to admit, I was a big fan of the HTA 9. I thought those speakers were awesome. And I have a giant living room, at least volume wise, that makes it very difficult for Atmos, and it still sounded great. But the theater quads not only sound better, but the RF or Wi-Fi signal is significantly better. We did have some dropouts because of the size of the room that made it necessary for me to have that little box that comes with both systems really out in the open. And even when it was out in the open, it would still have some disconnects to the rear speakers. But the theater quad do not have that issue. We do not have any dropouts at all. And you do have a similar, little control box that has an HDMI in and out that do 4K 120, and it works really nicely, all while having no issues with the dropout. So significant improvement in that manner as well. But that's not to say that the HTA 9 wasn't good, and that's why I shipped it off to my parents for their downstairs room, because it's a much smaller room with regards to the vertical height. I mean, they only have 8-foot ceilings there, as opposed to here we have like 20-foot ceilings. And so I think it's going to be a great fit for them. We even connected it to a non-Sony TV, which is okay. You do not have to have a Sony TV to make all this stuff work. And it did not disappoint. Smaller room, speakers were all over the place too. We had one of the front speakers lower right. We had another one kind of sitting on a subwoofer. The setup needs to get a little work here, obviously, but calibrated the whole room, and to be honest, sounded fantastic. There were no issues with where the speakers were. It just was set there, optimized, and boom, it sounded fantastic. We didn't even have a sub there either. I would recommend at least having the SW3, and of course the 5 is really what you want to have if you're in a big room, but with the SW3, this system would be fantastic for years. So big fan of the HTA 9, but that brings me back to the Bravia Theater Quad. Now I have this in my living room, and I can tell you it's not going anywhere. It is a fantastic fantastic system. I mean, to have 16 different speakers in my living room with just 4 units on the wall, not having to have a center channel where I have my UST projector right now, so it's kind of complicated anyways if I was to have a center channel. But basically, it's doing a great job with that phantom center channel, which is the most important one to me. I know it's sending sound all over the room, and I'm very happy with that. I can control the rears, I can control the subwoofer. I'm able to get the different sound quality that I want in the room based on the optimization, the app, the Sony Connect app. So all that's great, but really that phantom center is the main issue for me. And again, having the old A90J TV that I had, the 83-inch with the HTA9s, those were a little wider, and the fact that they were in that shape made it a little bit harder for that center channel to work. Whether I turned the TV on and used that as a center or I turned it off and those speakers were wide, it was a little bit challenging to hear that center channel. But with the Theater Quad, I both have a better phantom center, I have better sound overall, and I'm very happy with this system. I did connect all these systems to the Bravia 9, which is an awesome TV, and it has pretty good sound. It's supposed to be a great opportunity for you to use that S center sync, but I just didn't think it added value to it. I think the only TVs that I've noticed where there's added value is when they have that acoustic panel where the sound is coming out from the OLED TV. So you're talking about the Bravia 8 and you're talking about the A95L, which is really awesome. When you're connecting that specifically to the sound bars, I do think it increases your sound stage vertically, and you just get the added value of the menu systems so you can kind of tinker with everything. But I don't think that's the case for the HTA9 or the quad system. I would just leave that off. I would not use that even if I had a Sony OLED. I had the old A90J 83-inch, and the HTA9 still sounded better without the TV connected just because there was a little mismatch with the amount of sound coming out versus those speakers. So now the most important part, buying advice. What should you guys buy with your hard-earned money? That's very important. And I would have to note a couple of improvements made on the new speaker systems, or just what you can do with them. One being the use of the Bravia Connect app. So the older speakers have a remote with more buttons on them, but in order to set them up, you have to go to the HDMI source and see it on screen, or just hit the buttons on the remote. Now with the newer speaker systems, you're able to use the Bravia Connect app, which is very convenient for both sound optimization and just controlling them in general. So big benefit there. You'll have to decide if that's worth another 20 or 30% based on your use case. Another benefit is that Voice Zoom 3. So if you're gonna have a new Sony TV, you might wanna pair it with a new Sony soundbar that can connect and use the Voice Zoom 3, where you're able to kind of raise and lower that sound based on what you're watching, whether you can hear it well or not. So that's a nice feature as well. I know some people complain that it was either on or off before, and now you have the ability to kind of manipulate that and make it what you want. And lastly, there are some sound improvements, of course, specifically on the quad system. I like the new setup, the new look of the quad system, and I like the improved phantom center. And then the Bar 9 with the dome tweeters and also having the passive radiators, I do think you get an added benefit of it sounding better, and it also not being such a big bulky soundbar. Though I'm not sure I'd want to wall mount any of these sound bars or systems. Obviously the quads and the HTA9 can be mounted, but these sound bars are a little big. A lot of people just set them on the stands. You're going to get great sound, and to be honest, the lower and more ear level height you have them on, the better they're going to sound. You're going to get some more vertical sound. So if you end up mounting them a little too high or up on a wall or over a fireplace, sometimes you lose a little bit of that vertical sound. It's just difficult. But for me, the absolute best system that you can currently get, in my opinion, is the Theater Quad system with the SW5 sub, but that is quite expensive. And when you're considering cost, the fact that the HTA9 is nearly $1,000 less than the quad system right now makes me wonder if you guys would opt for that, because you could get the HTA9 with the sub for basically the price of just the Bravia Theater Quad right now. So that is something to consider, because like I had said, if you don't have a really big room, then you probably wouldn't experience any of the dropouts. I know other people have not had dropouts before on the HTA9. So I do think it's a combination of having probably too much Wi-Fi going on in my house, but also it is a big room volume wise, and I think it is difficult for it to triangulate where those rear speakers are sometime and feed that signal back to those speakers, especially when people are walking around and they're just in random places. So I think that's the only downside. And then the look of them. When the HTA9 came out, I didn't think it looked abnormal. I thought they were pretty cool looking speakers. I still think they are. But I just think that the Theater Quad system is refined and it looks cooler and it works a little bit better. I don't know if it's worth twice the price, but that's what the price is currently. So that's something that you'd have to think think about. But to be able to get that entire system at the same cost as just the quads is something to consider. The same can be said with regards to the Bar 9 being a little bit more expensive than the HD A7000. Now, again, I really like the HD A7000 with regards to its sound quality. I think it's fantastic. So it is $400 less than the Bar 9. So that is, again, something you have to consider, because you could technically get the HD A7000 along with the SW3 subwoofer for the same price as just getting this Bar 9. But the Bar 9 does look a little nicer. It has a nice matte finish. It's lighter, so if you're going to wall mount it, definitely easier. And it does sound better. So I think there are a lot of benefits to getting the Bar 9. And to be honest, if you're getting a brand new product, people might just opt for getting the Bar 9, so you get that Voice Zoom 3, so you get the Bravia Connect app. It really works well with some of the OLED TVs. So if you're going to get a Sony A95L, you're already putting out a good amount of money. So getting this nice soundbar would probably be recommended. But the HD A7000 is a very good soundbar as well. And I don't think there's a huge drop off. I just think there's some great upgrades to the Bar 9. And I'd probably opt for the RS5 surround speakers from last year, just because they have vertical sound placement. So that's pretty cool. They are rather big. They're almost as big as the old HD A9 speakers. So you're going to have some space to set them on, that same round shape. I feel like Sony might be able to get away with making a smaller rear speaker. And I don't know if we need it to be battery powered like the RS5s. The only time I ever remembered that it was battery powered is when the speaker was disconnected and I actually had to plug it back in, and then I saw it charging. I'm never going to have my rear speakers battery powered. So the fact that they're so big and bulky, I feel like they probably could shrink them down, remove the battery, and just focus on sound quality, and you'd be good to go. So I like the size of the RS3S speakers, but I would like vertical height on them. So it's kind of like back and forth. What are you going to need? Do you want to just go with having rear speakers in general in order to take off some of the pressure on the soundbar? And the same goes for the subwoofer I didn't mention earlier. That's the, one of the best benefits, obviously, to have that low end bass, but it also takes off some of the low end coming out of the soundbar so it can focus on just good, clean sound quality. So a great system would be the Bar 9, the SW5 sub, and the RS5 speakers. Now, when it goes to the Bar 8, I think that's where I would absolutely get the Bar 8 over the HDA 5000, because right now there's only $100 difference. So you're talking about a lot of upgrades and a lot of sound quality benefits and the connection to that app and a lot of good things for only like $100 more. So absolutely, I think the Bar 8 is where I would start. With a lot of these products, I would go ahead and get the Bar 8, and I would probably get one of the subs, maybe the SW3. And you're talking about around $1,000 for that setup. That's where I would go first. And if you wanted to add speakers with this setup, I would just get the RS3S speakers to add in, because they're still really good. And that's the exact system that my dad has now with that Bravia 8 TV. And it's a fantastic system. It's a great combination. It all pairs well together. It all works well together. On-screen menus, access to the app. I mean, you really can't lose, especially in a room like they have. It's not a gigantic room, but it's a typical living room. So they really like it. It's a great setup for them. I know people are probably going to give me a hard time because the TV's so high, but that's where my dad wanted it, so he doesn't have to look over people's heads that are on that couch in front of there where Jacoby's sitting. But that's just the way it is, and I know people are still going to comment that the TV's too high. But this is not a video about mounting that TV. It's really just a feel-good video about this entire Sony ecosystem. I'm very happy to have had a chance to look at all this stuff and kind of put them in different rooms and see different combinations and understand what I think would be best to buy. But you guys will have to let me know in the comments what you guys think. What are you going to go for in this Sony ecosystem? What questions do you have? I'm sure I've missed some things. There are a lot of more technical reviews out there, but I really wanted you guys to understand what we're going to be using these for and kind of how they fit into different use cases. So let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and make sure to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you're interested in purchasing anything, there's links in the description below that help support the channel. We really appreciate that. And I want everyone to have a fantastic 2025. We'll see you in the next year.